Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pediatric Speech Sister Show, where I learn with you and we meet with expert guests across industries to learn how we can be more culture responsive in our day to day lives and our work settings. Today, I have Marlene Nero. I am so thankful, Marlene, to have you on here because, first of all, your Instagram name says it all, Trilingual Bimodal SLP, which I to be honest, haven't heard that before until I came across your page. So I'm very thankful to learn from you. I think that in the most recent years, at least with the Pediatric Speech Sister brand, I've had the pleasure and the privilege of meeting with people from the deaf community, and unfortunately, they're just not as heard. And I know that you have a lot of experience working with people from the deaf community and Spanish people from the deaf community. So I'm very excited to learn your story. Can I share with the audience your bio?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So, Marlene is a trilingual bimodal speech language pathologist, fluent in English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. She is a first generation American. Her parents are from Mexicali, Baja California, Mexico. Marlene earned her bachelor's degree with honors cum laude in speech pathology at Nevada State University, where she was awarded her first ever David Kelsey Award for her achievements in ASL. She earned her master's degree in speech language pathology from Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. Marlene's professional experience has been primarily in the mainstream deaf and hard of hearing programs, private practice, and early intervention. She dedicates her sacred efforts towards creating equity among the Latina communities with deaf and hard of hearing children through her work in the community. Marlene, I am so honored to have you on the show. Is there anything that I missed with your bio that you'd like to share?
Not at all. You got it. Thank you.
Yay. Well, first, one thing I always like to ask my guests, what is your why? Why did you come in the field and why did you stay?
For me, my why is very directly related with the deaf community and other marginalized communities. Something that one of my supervisors, when I was an undergrad, she looked at me and she said, I think that if you didn't get to work with deaf kids, you wouldn't love the field of speech pathology. And at the
Mm,
time, I said, I think I love working with deaf kids. That realization had hit me. But what the depth of what she said, I think rings true today. And I realized that since back then, she saw something in me that I love working with people and communities specifically. That if I had a caseload that was very straightforward, or if I was an Arctic SLP, for me, it doesn't have the
mm,
significance. It does not give me my why at all.
mhm,
For me, my why is related to creating equity, bridging communities, bridging between worlds. I think that goes back to my values as a bilingual person from childhood. It has always been two worlds, two cultures, two languages. So for me, learning ASL and bridging between different, even the deaf community, I think that really gives me my why. If I don't work with those communities, I find that there is no why for me. The speech, the field of speech and language pathology wouldn't have the purpose that it has for me. So definitely my why is tied to creating equity and elevating voices that need to be heard, like you mentioned before, which is why how I came to your channel and how I kind of caught up on what you've been doing. Because when you had the deaf guests on your show during, I think it was Deaf History Month last September,
mhm,
that was kind of when I saw your channel and said, wow, here's another SLP that doesn't know ASL that's creating a space where people who, are not of the same community like yourself, you're not a part of the deaf community, but you are allowing for that connection to be made. And that's really my why. That's why I do what I do as well.
Wow. Well, really, thank you for being here. And I just hearing your story, you are obviously so needed. I don't know how many times you hear that, but I mean, you are so specialized that we really need you because just like what you said, not many of us know ASL, but you would think that we would have that often in our grad programs, but unfortunately, we know. like baby sign language, or we know enough ASL to help us with early intervention kiddos, or even, children with autism, but not enough to really be able to serve the parents, which brings me
Mhm.
to my next question, because I know that that was something that you were really passionate about. So can you tell us really just challenges that you have come across when serving this community?
Definitely. So, like you mentioned before, I work with deaf children and I have worked with deaf adults before in my university clinic when I was in my grad program. But all of my work experience has been primarily with deaf kids. And some of the challenges have been very complex and it's hard to, tease it all apart very quickly. But what I will say is that having worked in the school setting, the biggest challenges have been for me, for someone like me, I can communicate with the families if they speak English or Spanish or ASL. So that was not really a barrier for me. The barrier for me has been the greater public or people outside of our immediate surroundings. So at my school, we can communicate, we can spread information. But like one step outward would be the families outside of the school. So collaborating with the families and can they access the classes that we're providing? For example, our teachers would provide ASL classes for the parents after school, but those classes were in English. So the Spanish speaking families would attend the classes, but they would understand the actual instruction going on. They would just, pick up what they could, which is everyone's doing the best that they can. And then another step outside of that was the outside community telling families that they shouldn't learn to sign, that learning sign language will stunt a child's speech development. And then outside of Las Vegas, the greater society believes myths about ASL and perpetuate myths about deaf people and deaf people can't talk, deaf people, all deaf people know sign. None of those things are true. So just raising awareness has been the biggest challenge when working in a setting like a school, because I'm giving everything I can to my students. But raising awareness and spreading education to people outside of our school into our city and outside of our city into our state and outside of our state nationwide has been a huge challenge. So that's what's really brought me online more so these since 2020. We also became teletherapists overnight, and I joined the Instagram community where I kind of started to tackle those challenges. But before that, it was very difficult to see positive change when what you're doing is the best you can just for your caseload and those children that you get to work with.
And I hear a lot of passion in your voice when you are talking about that. So, do you have a specific story with a parent, or with your, even with yourself, that you can share that
Yes.
really made this touch home for you?
Absolutely. I wish we had 5 hours to talk. We
Yeah,
could
yeah,
just
yeah,
unpack it, right? So,
yeah.
one story specifically is a story of how I became inspired to apply to go to graduate school, because when I graduated with my bachelor's degree in the state of Nevada, we are able to work with a bachelor's level degree in the school district. So, really, I was doing the job essentially of a CCC-SLP in the school district, and I didn't have a desire to work in any other setting. So, I was content working in the schools. To be honest, I still to this day love working in schools. But the difficulty I had was with credibility. So I was put in situations where we were in IEP meetings and I had to advocate for the student. So, for example, the family said, my child needs speech therapy because they need to learn how to talk. And I had to be one of the team members to advocate for the child and say, your child has language. They can speak American Sign Language fluently. It's not that they can't talk, it's that you don't know sign language, so you're not able to communicate with them. The child is able to access their academic setting, which I didn't mention this, but I was working in a TC program. So that's a total communication program where spoken
Okay.
language and sign language is being used. So
Okay.
it was a lot of mediating expectations, and it does come down to counseling, which is difficult to do in an IEP meeting because it's very high stakes. It can be a bit, everyone's a bit tense, like, are things going to go how we want them to go for the student? And parents are thinking, are things going to go how I want them to go for my child? So it is not an ideal environment to have hard talks a lot of the time, unfortunately.
Mhm.
I'm so sorry. What was your question? Just remind me real quick.
Wow,
Oh,
wow.
a specific story. Yeah.
Yes, yes, here we
Okay.
are.
That was the backstory to answering your question, because it was during one of these
Yes.
IEP meetings that there was a speech pathologist in the room that had her C's, happened to be a lady, who told me that it was wrong of me to recommend dismissal or reduction in services for the child. and that she's been working with the kid every day at home because the child can't talk. So there's no way that they're going to be able to communicate with the hearing world. And there was so much ableism there and so much misinformation and so much cultural insensitivity there that I thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't. My voice does not stand up to everyone else's. I have to go to graduate school. I have to go to Gallaudet. I have to. So then it was like taking the world upon my shoulders, which was too much. I have since learned to take a step back. It's not all my responsibility. But that's what really, I think, fueled my passion for advocacy for the kids and really working on my credentials and becoming a student, for life, and really posturing myself like that and being more, educating myself as much as possible so that I could be the best advocate I could in those situations.
Thank you. What would you say are the most common questions that people ask you? Especially since you've opened up your Instagram page and your platform, what do speech pathologists reach out to you about typically?
Yeah, speech pathologists reach out a lot for tips. Like they'll ask me, "Oh, I have a student and this is the situation." So I usually get those types of inquiries. Also, students who want to apply for Gallaudet reach out and they ask me questions like, how was it to move from the West Coast to the East Coast? That one I particularly love is getting to know the next generation of SLPs and being like, oh, these were my mistakes. This is what I could have done better if this is of any help to you. And I think I get a lot of, thankfully, I'm able to build community with people who are facing similar struggles. So I've been very candid on my stories on Instagram about the struggles of mental health burnout, and working with this population can be very draining because of all the external struggles that we have, like the public's misinformation and other professionals that don't take the culturally sensitive approach. So thankfully, I've been able to build a lot of community. So I'll get messages like, this is the same situation I had, or I'm so frustrated. And it's an opportunity to connect with professionals who are facing the same challenges. So it's a mix. It's like asking for help, asking me questions, and communicating and building community with each other and finding common ground. That part I really love all of it, actually.
And thank you for being in this space. That does bring me to my next question so I don't know if you remember seeing that poll. I'm actually going to have to just pause and pull that poll up, where I think it was Sunday night, and I asked who all is monolingual, who all is trilingual, who all is bilingual. And of course, most speech pathologists are monolingual. So
Yes.
what advice could you give us so that way we could be more culture responsive to it's kind of a two-part question. So the first part, how we can be more culture responsive to multilingual students, but also how we can be more culture responsive to Spanish-speaking deaf and hard of hearing parents. Yeah, I'm like, I might have to write that one down.
My working memory, I need an accommodation.
That's
Really.
amazing. Thank you so much.
Multilingual.
Yes.
Yes. And I know the questions and you sent them to me, but I have with all the thoughts and ideas, I have to have a visual reminder.
Yes,
so
yes.
yeah,
And
it's a
please,
two-part
honestly,
question.
please share any idea. And I will say this, Marlene, any
Yes.
idea that comes to your mind and comes to your spirit is for this audience. So you have the floor. If there's anything else that you want to add or bring up to us that I'm not asking, please feel free to share.
I am so grateful to be here, and I'm so grateful that you really open the space for us to have these conversations, because it's not common at all. And that's why I couldn't wait to connect with you. I have been buzzing for the past several hours, just so excited to be here. And I'm so, so grateful. I just want you to know that. And as a listener of your podcast, it's just like nourishment to my soul, hearing all the conversations you're having. It really helps me, my mental health, to hear and have this space. And thank you for making sure that it exists. I really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart.
You. That means so much. Really, thank you.
I mean it. So the two-part question, and then I have to take it a step further. So we're going to blend it all together. So first of all, multilingual students, and then Spanish-speaking families of DHH children.
Yes.
So first, let's go on the side of multilingual students. You and I know the importance of cultural responsiveness, cultural humility. I cannot emphasize that enough for upcoming students and for all monolingual SLPs, because for all SLPs, it is extremely important to be culturally responsive, culturally sensitive, meaning that you incorporate the family, you collaborate with the family, you never treat a multilingual student the same way that you would a monolingual student. Another one of the principles that always blows my mind, and I see it come up a lot, a bilingual or multilingual student is not two monolingual students in one. And I'm using the word student within the context of school, but it
Okay,
applies
right.
to,
Of
I'll
course,
try to change
clients.
that.
Yeah.
Multilingual people. Like when I'm talking, I was thinking about this today because I said something wrong. I mispronounced a word in an audio I sent my brother. And I listened back to myself and I was like, oh, I mispronounced that word. So I can come across as I can be quite articulate, but other times I'm not. I'm a multilingual person and words come and go. I speak multiple languages. Like you and I, when we were getting connected, I code switched to ASL. I didn't even
Yes.
realize it.
Yes, it was
So
amazing. It was amazing.
until you pointed it out and you noticed that. Thankfully, you are an SLP, so you come across a
Yeah.
lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. We should be the people that pick up on stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that is a part of being multilingual. So just remember that we need to look at these students with a different lens. We need to keep our minds open, and whatever comes up with them, we need to be ready to include that, like in our assessments. So observations are super duper important. Observations, what you pick up, to us it's nothing, but that's because of our years of training and studying that you do pick up on things like code switching. That's
Mhm.
natural for you. It's natural for us, but it's not natural to the average person. So I would say
And I
monolingual SLPs, you have that skill. Mhm.
and I'm so sorry, can I pause you? Because I will say it's not natural to every speech pathologist. No, it's natural
Mm,
to myself because I intentionally have that. I went to Howard, so it's a culture responsive environment in
mm,
Washington, DC, just like you went to grad school in DC as well. It's a culture
yeah,
responsive environment. So my brain is turned on to those things. And I do just want to share with the audience because I just
thank
thought that
you.
was the coolest thing. I said to you, I said, "Can you hear me okay?" You said, "Yes." I was like, "Oh my gosh, what?" Yeah, that was so cool. But yeah, no, so no, actually, monolingual speech language pathologists aren't necessarily in tune to that. I don't know if
Mhm.
someone would have picked up that you were saying yes in ASL, or if they would have just thought that that was just a gesture that you were using.
Okay, that's very helpful for me because I
Yeah.
am bilingual since childhood, since sequential, like since birth. I started learning two languages. And then where
Mhm.
I went to graduate school, it was also a very culturally responsive environment. It's,
Yeah.
the Deaf University. So
Yeah.
I assumed that that we would have that ability. So if that's not the case, then I would say definitely tune in. Whatever switch needs to be turned on, that needs to be a part of the assessment, that needs to be part of the treatment, because there are going to be things that pop up that we should be curious about and don't disregard. Be
Mhm.
curious about it. Ask questions. Call somebody that you know, ask around, go on your little SLP department forum and put, hey, does anyone here speak this language? My student does, and I want to know what kind of things I should look out for. So I would recommend that for working with kids, to turn on that switch or to become more familiar. Like, I need to notice when people are code switching and be curious like you were and ask or say something like, oh, I noticed you did this. Does that have to, and you knew what that it had to do with ASL, but then I was able to share like, oh yeah, you're right. I did sign. I didn't even notice.
Yep, yep. And then the second question was about parents, how we can be better servants to the parents.
Yes. And I love that your pup is showing up in the
I know.
video.
I'm like, by the way, Chief wants to hang out, so it's
Oh my
fine
gosh, I
as
love
long as he
that.
doesn't
I
knock over
have
my plants.
I have a senior pup and I'm wondering if she's gonna want to show up too because she's very assertive.
I
Now,
hope she does.
For Spanish speaking deaf and hard families who have a deaf and hard of hearing child, I think it's super important to include them in everything that your school is providing and to share as many resources as you can, even if you don't speak the native language. I think it's really easy, or I have seen SLPs or all educators say things like, oh, but they don't speak English, dot, dot,
Right,
dot.
right.
There's just like a sense of giving up or being like, I would do this, but talk about that, and I have,
Oh, the Wi-Fi network connection. Let's see if we could do something. I can hear you. The connection is at 50%. We can hear you though. You can hear now? Okay. It might just reboot a little bit, but yeah, we can hear you.
Completely frozen.
Okay, 1 second. Marlene, I'm gonna remove you and then can you log back in?
But it is not a helpful approach or
Okay, well, wait, before I remove you. Okay, we're back. You're about to type to me in the chat.
Okay.
1 second. Oh,
Yep, I'm
okay,
typing.
yeah, we're back. Okay, we're back, y'all. So yeah, if you work on Zoom, you already know the deal, so it's fine. We're good.
Yes,
We're back.
Exactly. Thank you for your patience. It's much appreciated. So the right attitude is to start looking. If you have a family that speaks Spanish and they have a deaf and hard of hearing child, hello, we are out here. Find us online. I'm not the only one. There are several people that I collaborate with online. And thankfully, through 2020, many things that were not digital before became digital all of a sudden. So if you connect on my page and if you connect with my colleagues, there are resources out there for families that speak Spanish, but you, the SLP, need to take your fingies, type in Google, type in Instagram, and look and find stuff. There is stuff out there. Thankfully, if you connect with somebody like me, we often share those resources widely because we want families to reach. And I mean, we want to reach the families and we want that information to reach your families. So many of I can speak for myself and my colleague Amanda Medina Padilla, who is going to listen to this later on playback. We are constantly sharing resources. We're constantly wanting to reach families. And if we can collaborate, that is like the most wonderful thing. So please search for resources, reach out to people, ask for that flyer to be translated in Spanish. I can't tell you enough how many times there is a DHH event and it's all in English. And what that says indirectly is that Spanish speakers are not invited. So I will often ask, can this be in Spanish? Or I've just started doing it myself because I'm tired. I'm tired of having to be the one who always has to make it accessible for the Spanish speaking families. If you have, and that's one of the top 3 spoken languages in the United States. So I have seen it. It's been getting better. Now when I see a flyer in English and Spanish, I'm thrilled. So it's happening, but we need to keep advocating, and please do that in your local community and say, hey, we have a family that speaks Spanish. Can they come? And they'll be like, absolutely, probably, absolutely. But they didn't think that the flyer itself being in English is not accessible to other people that speak other languages. So we need to work on that. We need to make sure that it's happening. So now the funnel that I was going into that I said I was going to take it a little bit deeper is the multilingual DHH population.
Okay.
There are deaf people that come to the United States, we are a melting pot or we are a salad or whatever. In the United States, we have people from many different countries, from many different backgrounds. And if you take the deaf population, there are multilingual deaf people. There are deaf children who are learning ASL or no ASL, whose families speak Spanish, and they're learning English at school. Because the reality is that the United States is very geared towards English educationally and for work. And, you need to learn English in order to have currency. So the deaf community learns English, and maybe their primary language is ASL, or maybe their primary language was Spanish at home, and they had to learn ASL because they have, reduced hearing levels. So there is a whole population of multilingual DHH people that can be a little scary for someone who is a monolingual SLP. So another part of what I do is provide consultation for those cases. Maybe you work in a district that does not typically have multilingual DHH people. In one example, even in my district in Las Vegas, we had a student come from El Salvador who she just, dropped in one day, and she's an adolescent. She was 14 at the time, or a teenager. She was a teenager. She just popped up in the US. Hey, I'm here. And thankfully, the director of my department she emailed me, or I somehow got a request from, the director, and I was, oh my goodness, I felt so
Yeah.
honored. But basically they were like, Marlene, can you help us? Because we don't have a way to assess this child, at the headquarters, at the child find location. So then I was able to go out there and complete the assessment. But there's not a trilingual bimodal SLP in every district. So something that I recommend SLPs do is request a consultation from somebody who is specialized. It can be difficult, but thankfully now, like I have opened up consultations, Language First organization. If you're a monolingual SLP and you're dealing with a DHH case that's confusing, or a multilingual DHH case, Language First has a list of professionals that are available to consult with you. And Café con Lenguaje, which is Amanda Medina Padilla's private practice, can consult with you. So there are resources out there for you, because it can become very niche, but I promise that most of us that are in that niche, we love it. This is our bread and butter. This is what we love to do. And I've had situations where, from Port Angeles, so my colleague, who is a school psychologist, her name's Rachel, and she's a friend of mine now. We've become very good friends. Funny backstory, and I hope I don't lose track of the question again, but we used to have to share an office. So I worked at a public school, a Title I public school. That was like, it runs through my veins. They didn't have enough space for us. It's like a very, low income school, but it is an excellent school. You know what I mean? But I wasn't in a closet. I got an office, with the caveat that I had to share it with a school psychologist.
Which is honestly, I love working with school psychs. So that was probably a blessing in disguise. I love school psychs.
Thank you, Melanie. That is exactly where I am going. It transformed my approach completely, because collaborating with her was the greatest thing. I understood so much more about the evaluation process, the triennial reevaluation process, working as a team. Like literally, we're like, shoulder to shoulder working together. And thankfully, we even became friends. That's like the bonus, right? So fast forward 5 years later, and we learned from each other, I have to say. She also learned a lot from me, and we got to exchange. I think that's super important too, interprofessional practice. So we exchanged so much, and then, sadly, she left. She moved to Washington, and I ended up leaving the district. So fast forward many years later, I get a text from her, Marlene, we have a multilingual DHH client in our district. Is there any way you can get on FaceTime with me? So this is not unusual for bilingual SLPs, for you to get a request from a friend, or, from another district. But she texted me, and I said, yes, let me know when you can meet. And we decided it was a very complex case. So I actually had her, we turned it into a formal consultation. The wonderful thing about this scenario is that they had a very intricate case of a student that lived in the US 50% of the time, and 50% of the time lived in India. And it's a child with a cochlear implant, so profoundly deaf. There's a language deprivation component to the whole thing. And they're grasping at straws. They were trying to get consultation within their district. They were waiting on the itinerant DHH teacher to get back to them. They were waiting on the audiologist assigned to that area to get back to them. The meeting is in a week. So they were stressed. And I was able to consult with them, and I just said, hey, these are the things that I'm seeing. They had questions to ask me. I said, give them to me. We made a little game plan so that they knew kind of where the team was going to go and what they had to do. I have to say that gives me so much joy and satisfaction to say, this is aligned with my why. I believe that's part of the reason why I'm doing this, and part of my destiny is to be able to talk to people who need help, and who, we have multilingual kids, and we have Spanish-speaking multilingual kids, and then you get to the bottom and it's multilingual DHH kids. That is extremely specific. And because of my background, I happen to know a lot about ASL. I happen to know a lot about the deaf community. I happen to be in the deaf community still to this day. I'm very closely related to all these things. So it's my privilege to get to do that for people. That gives me so much joy to think that all the struggle that I've been through to get educated and to learn a new language, and it hasn't always been easy. I had to fight for so much to get to where I am today, that if I'm able to give back, and if I'm able to kind of see that student in my head, and to know that I could have impacted their education, to me, that's the reward. I have to say it, and I get emotional, and I love how Fong Palafox says that this is just who
Yeah.
we are. I do. It is very personal, and I cannot remove, my life and what I do because it's just not possible for me. So I have to say that, like, what I got to do for Rachel and her colleague that day, it reminded me of my why, because I had to leave the district. I was so burnt out, and the district where I was working in for over 5 years. I loved it, but I didn't have the ability to say no. I didn't have the ability to set boundaries with the work that I was doing. And someone like me, I think you can tell, I just give. I'm a giver, and I want to do so much, but learning to balance myself and giving to myself what I give out to others has been a lifelong lesson for me. But now, I'm doing my own private practice, and I was able to open up consultations because of a more flexible schedule. And I'm still getting those calls and those texts, and it gives me joy because I really want to keep doing that. And I think that fighting for my boundaries and fighting for my mental health enables me to be able to reach people that are further away, or on the other part of the globe,
Yeah.
or even just in the district now. And I still get calls, from people who I used to work with, and I'm just so grateful that I still get to do this, and I want to be in this for the long haul, but I had to learn a lot of hard lessons along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are graduate students, for example, or the early career professionals listening to this, like, whoa, I definitely resonate with Marlene's story. And also, I feel a lot of hope from your words, just because you are living your why and you're just like, I'm still here. And I could just tell that your heart is so full, still doing what you're doing. So, one last question. What changes would you like to see in this industry?
For me, I did already mention about making sure that our activities and our resources are accessible to multilingual people in general. We are not a monolingual society. We cater to a monolingual society, but we aren't one. That's just the reality. So if you're not including people who speak different languages, that says a lot about who is able to access your services. Because if you're not, I understand that we don't have to be fluent in every language. Nobody is saying that. I don't, like I said before, I don't anticipate that people will have my exact journey and become exactly like I am. That's not at all an expectation. Or like you are of a very specific background, and this is where you have ended up, and you're merging everything of your life experiences together, and now you have this. Not everyone can have our experience. So I think just being open and being receptive, being culturally responsive, I think is the key, to be honest. Because that is the change I want to see with the current generation of SLPs and the upcoming generation of SLPs. I had the privilege of talking to an undergrad group at Cal State Fullerton, and I was a guest speaker for them. And something that kept resonating for me was the importance of cultural responsiveness, because even if you don't speak 2 languages or more, even if I know you aspire to be a polyglot, and I totally love that. I think that me too. If I had the brain power, I would also.
Right,
But
right. The
I
brain
think
power,
3 is
that
my
part.
max. Yeah, the brain power. But I love that for you. I think that that's wonderful.
Thank you.
And I have so much respect. My mother-in-law speaks 7 languages.
That's
She's like,
incredible.
and she's a pillar of her community. I think that enables her to do so many things, and she truly is a pillar of her community. But I want to say that that's not an expectation that you would learn to speak Spanish and that you would magically be able to, but just being culturally responsive is the key, because that will create that posture that you need to be able to work with the families in a way that is going to be equitable for them. So I want the current SLPs and the upcoming SLPs to take that to heart. I did work with Jackie Rodriguez. She worked in a district where she had never worked with deaf kids before. And I saw her using more ethical practices than the people who had been in deaf ed for decades, because of her being very extremely well-versed and expert in intersectionality and cultural responsiveness. That I can work with. That you will get what I'm saying. If you have been in the field for decades and you have been in deaf ed for decades, but you don't understand cultural responsiveness, it's going to be very difficult to work for that student. It's going to be hard. So that's the number one takeaway. And I know that that's what you preach. And I have to say that is 1000% what I would recommend.
And honestly, I just really feel that. Thank you so much for driving it home because the thing I'm thinking is, and no shame at all, but I hope
Mhm.
that someone who is, for example, 10 years down the road in their career working in deaf education, but they notice that they might not be as culture responsive, which also, by the way, is a journey. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, there's so much I have to learn still. But,
Yeah.
what I hope is, and my biggest prayer is that people can turn on that switch. So just like how you said that Jackie, it's a switch. Seeing you say yes, like at the same time, that's just a switch that I have because this is my why. This is what I do. But if that's not necessarily where you're leading towards, or if the graduate programs don't necessarily even talk about the deaf and hard of hearing community even being a culture and having their own culture,
Right.
then how are you really going to know unless you come to things like this? So thank you
Mhm.
so much, Marlene. Where can people find you? One, and two, how can people hire you for consult and training?
Sure. So you can find me, like you said, on Trilingual Bimodal SLP on Instagram. And then I have an Instagram page, excuse me, for my private practice, which is trilingual underscore TX underscore center. So my private practice is Trilingual Therapy Center. And my website is trilingualtherapy.com, and it's under construction. But soon you'll be able to request consultations from the site. You'll also be able to download a handout that I made for the undergrad program, which is all about navigating the field as a trilingual SLP. You'll also be able to access all of the professional developments that I've done in both English and Spanish, where you can share that with a colleague, share that with the family, and you can access all that there. So my website and my Instagram it's very easy to reach me, even though I do get overwhelmed sometimes. And DMs is the best place to reach me if you want to chat. I would love to. And then yeah, requesting consults will be through my website, or you can just send me a DM and I will send you the Google form for that. It's not complicated.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marlene, for coming. And thank you, everybody who came to watch this live and who are watching the replay. Thank you, everybody, just for your commitment to creating a more diverse and culture responsive industry in society. Please come back next week. We'll be meeting with Tani De La Pina about how we can be more culture responsive and working with people who are non religious in a very religious society. So stay tuned for that. Thank you, Marlene.